There you are. Good. They said you were waiting. Sorry for the delay. I was just finishing up some last-minute sewing. Now Simmons is your name, I believe. Is that right?
Screw you!
Spirited. That was on your resume. This should be a fun podcast.
What's happening, Hellspawn? Welcome back to another episode of Spawnography, in which we will discuss two of the Spawn issues of all time. We have finally crossed the burden of the issue number 50, the barrier, I should say, of issue number 50. And the race is over. We're now on to 51 and 52. And boy, before we get into that, Pierce, how the heck are you, buddy? It's not actually been that long since I saw you. We were just in town in California together for our buddy's wedding.
It's true. I've been great. It's only been 4 days since I've seen you, which in person, since I've been able to be in your physical space. So it's nice to be home. It's weird, but it's nice to get back to recording. Also, we did a little marathon bunch of records right before we went to the wedding. Yeah. So it's nice to get back to it, to build that buffer up again, baby.
That's right.
These are certainly two of the Spawn issues of all time. And, you know, I thought we'd be in a new era, but we're not quite there yet. It's a little bit of, it feels like we've gone forwards to go backwards. But how have you been since you got back from Cali?
You know, just hanging in there, been working, keeping the lights on. I mostly just have been getting back to the usual, as they say. The jet lag hit me hard this time. It's always easy for me going to the West Coast. Coming back is when it hits me like a ton of bricks. But, other than that,
had a few days of that too.
Yeah. You saw Beetlejuice, and you were saying it was pretty good.
Yesterday. I liked it. By the
is
time
Beetlejuice
this episode,
a Hellspawn?
No, he's more of a violator. No, because he's not born in hell, right? He was human at one point. So,
right.
I guess in a way he is a Hellspawn in the sense that I guess in the Beetlejuice world, going to hell makes you a demon. Winona Ryder calls him a demon.
Yeah.
I would read that crossover.
I would write that crossover badly.
I would write it well.
Well, there you go. You've won the game of games, and I feel like some of this issue is a response, or some of this little two-parter is a response to that, as we see Spawn back in hell here. And yeah, it does feel like we got to issue 50, and Todd McFarlane had a big idea about what should be next, and we'll get into it. Hit me with the credits before I get too deep into this.
Yeah, let's kick things off. Spawn number 51. This is Freefall, story by Todd McFarlane, pencils by Greg Capullo, inks by Todd McFarlane and Danny Meeke, copy editor and letters Tom Warzikowski, colors by Brian Haberlin and Dan Kemp. This one is in memory of longtime Marvel and DC inker Jack Abel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he also inked the introduction of Wolverine for that was that Hulk 181 Herb Trimpe.
Yeah, Herb Trimpe was a penciler. Well, that's a nice tribute. R.I.P. Yeah, so I was kind of dancing around, not wanting to dive into it too deep, but I think we got to issue 50 and Todd was like, you know what? people are going to start reading with issue 51. And so we get
I hope not.
we get Al Simmons has to think about his whole life before he transcends hell and reaches another level. You know, we're into the journey of Al Simmons from one level of hell to the next, and it's, boy, he's really being taken places.
I think the thing that's starting to happen is that what Todd wants Spawn to be keeps changing in his mind. So we're seeing it kind of get worked out on the page, and it's really clunky. And like, I know that some of this gets played off as like, oh, this character lied to him, or he's being manipulated, and so the thing that we've seen is not necessarily true. This will become much more true, specifically with like him hitting Wanda. We'll
Right.
find out that was like an inserted memory of a thing that he didn't actually do. So there's this weird, like, Todd wanting to thread the needle on rehabilitating our idea of Al, which we've not really needed to this point. He's been on a solid arc of, I was a bad guy during my life, relatively, right? My job made me do bad things. I haven't always been there for the people that have needed me in this like new second chance at life, but I'm trying to fix that. Pretty solid. And
Right.
he kind of just did the ultimate thing, right? By saving Terry, deciding that he is going to be helping
Right.
Wanda by doing that, and essentially damning himself again.
To recap just slightly for listeners, the last thing that happened in Spawn number 50 is that Terry Fitzgerald was dying of inoperable cancer. And even though he knew that if he used his powers to such a degree it would send him to hell because his costume was in a state of flux, Al Simmons used part of his Hellspawn granted power to cleanse and cure Terry's body of the cancer. It was a miracle, they say, and as a result, he did indeed get jettisoned into hell, where he is now waking up after having experienced, what was the last one, the 5th level?
Yes.
He's
Was it?
This one's the 4th. He's waking up on the 4th level of hell, is the
I
point.
think he was on the second or third.
Yeah, well, whichever level of hell he was on, there's at least 9 of them or infinity of them. It's hard to say. He is now on the level of the fourth circle of hell. And so this level is represented by abject nothingness, meaning a lot of blank space on the page. I do kind of like the negative space with Spawn falling sort of into a void on that first opening page. It's almost the inverse of one of those Spawn cape splash pages we used to get. And it allows basically having the entirety of the background for a good chunk of this comic while Spawn is in hell being just a plain white blank space. It allows the art team to get a little more interesting with the panels and do a little more to bring a focal point onto Spawn and especially onto this weird freaking like flesh glob Slimer. This is what Slimer looked like in life, is
This
what
is
this guy
Flesh
is.
Oogie Boogie.
Yeah, this is definitely that. The creature that inhabits the 4th level of hell.
I don't know why I made his voice kind of crang.
Well, I mean, it kind of does look like him. Okay, like, especially when you get to this, there's this double page spread. It's Capullo on this issue, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. But it's Danny Miki, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, you can tell that I'm having quite a Friday evening. We're recording on a Friday, which is not always usual for us.
By the
because I
way,
immediately forgot all the credits.
by the way, the last issue he was on the second level of hell, which
Okay.
and this is a little bit important because you brought up the abject nothingness of the 4th level.
Right.
We've seen the 4th level already. Do you remember where? In issue 8.
That's right.
So what's also happening here is that Todd is just contradicting Alan Moore's work on issue 8.
We can no prize our way into that by saying that everyone who goes to the 8th level of hell experiences it a little differently, and that this is something that Al Simmons is experiencing because
I
the end
guess.
result is the same in that he gets processed into the next part of hell. But that said, yeah, that's a good point that we did see a whole adventure through the 4th level of hell.
We at least passed by it. I mean, so in issue 50, he's in the second level.
Right.
We're told that it's the second level, and it looks fairly consistent with what we see in issue 8, where it's like in the brief panel that we see in issue 8, it's like snowy, seemingly. And what does he say about it? Oh, he says if you want to be a fur coat for some hyper intelligent ice shrimp.
Right.
Okay, that's
Hyper
not
intelligent ice
exactly.
shrimp. You're telling me a hyper intelligent ice shrimp fried this rice?
Yeah, exactly. So that's not exactly what we saw on that level. We saw those like monsters that were looking for nectar, right?
Right.
Nectar, right? It was like
Nectar.
snowish. I don't know. Maybe there's
But they
different
could also be
seasons.
ice shrimp in a way.
Sure, sure. Maybe Violator's making a joke there that we don't totally understand,
Right.
or one of the Fleabiac brothers, whichever one it is at that point. But like the
Vonculator.
the fourth, the fourth level, we don't see any of it technically, but we do get one line that is just on the fourth. You'd be a fuel rod.
Oh,
What does that
okay.
mean?
I don't know.
Like now, with the context of what we see on the fourth level, which is that we're going to find out that this is where the parasite uniforms are made. The fuck does that mean?
What does that mean? I don't know. I think you're right that it's a little bit of Todd McFarlane not even thinking about perhaps that some of this was laid out somewhere before. Honestly, I'll be real. 42 issues later, I wasn't even remembering a lot of that at this point. That's going back to episode 2 lore for Spawnography, which is way far back, even for us. I mean, it's
That
it's been a
is,
while.
yeah, it's almost a year ago. So at
Yeah,
this point, which is cool.
yeah.
Uh, this flesh monster, yeah, I mean, he's interrogated, or he's sort of he's flesh monster Freud, basically.
Right. He's like stripping apart all of Spawn Al Simmons' sins, and he's going through them bit by bit to see like what his traumas are and what caused him to become a hell spawn in the first place. And you mentioned Oogie Boogie, and this one panel here of his face, like the first like big close up you get where he's saying, "Now Simmons is your name, I believe." Is that right? That we were quoting at the beginning. Uh, just I love the way Greg
It's really
Capullo
fun.
draws this freaking creature.
I love
Like
it.
it almost looks like a boglin. You remember those, like the
Oh
creepy
yeah.
hand puppets? Anyway, it's very weird. It's got this weird Jabba the Hutt kind of quality, you know. And it's stripping the symbiote away from Spawn, which we'll learn is not protecting him because, as you said, this is where they're made, and so it's kind of braying to this flesh ghoul as its trainer and its beloved breeder.
So I have a question for you, because we're getting that from the flesh monster. We're hearing like, hey, like you've been chosen, like your soul is kind of what's at stake here. You've been chosen not because you are evil, but because you have committed sins and you have a capacity for evil. And this is something that we've heard about Al previously. And it's
Right.
always been tied to his job, which was being a world famous government assassin who's the world's sexiest man alive.
And we're seeing
Um,
here some of what he supposedly did, including murdering some innocents. And there's this particularly disturbing drawing of him, uh, Al Simmons, drenched in blood, standing in a pool of blood with like corpses all around him and his gun smoking, his knife dripping blood, supposedly showing the havoc that he wrought indiscriminately because he was quote unquote just following orders. I really like the art on both of these two pages. The one where his flesh is being stripped off and he's like just bone white, and
yeah.
then the one of that really kind of like demented drawing of Al. in
his
full
like
murder
commando
mode.
gear. Yeah. I like it. I like the art here, despite the lack of background, but I get that that's sort of, the vibe
Right.
that they're going for here. And there is a lot of text, so a lot of negative space for Tom Warzakowski to do his thing.
Yeah.
I just delivering all this information in this way, if this was the thing that you could do, and you're Malbolgia, why are you not sending this guy to the 4th level first?
Well, apparently his costume had to evolve to send him there. And that's what was happening is that supposedly, I think what we're supposed to be gathering here, as this creature also, as it's telling the story of Al Simmons' life, also again relates to the reader basically everything that's happened to Al Simmons up until this point. I think that
Like, is this just
the
twist? Is
point
this
was
just
sorry, I think the thing that we were supposed to get from this is that all the stuff Cagliostro is saying about your costume is evolving too early, it's reaching this point before you're ready, is that they wanted him to be ready to confront this, and he's not. And so what we see is at the end, the creature will have its way with him. But you're not wrong that this doesn't actually say anything, and we don't. That's me extrapolating that from having been judiciously and like interrogatively reading Spawn now for a long time. But we're not really getting any more than just another recap.
right? That's kind of my frustration here is that the flesh monster's not telling us anything particularly new. That also Al got sent back to hell because his suit evolved too quickly. So using his powers would send him to hell. But previously, we were told that he had to use up all of his powers to be sent to hell.
Yeah.
So there would, if he wouldn't be sent back to hell before all of his power was used up, wouldn't he
It's
never confront this flesh monster Freud? So he would never
Flesh
need to.
Monster Freud is definitely the name of our new ska band.
uh, but like, I'm confused about when this trial would ever happen for him, or is it that when he evolved to this level, it was going to happen no matter what?
I think it's that
If that's what it is, and that kind of makes sense, and then maybe he's just not
right.
prepped for this.
I think it's that he would have evolved no matter what, and he's just not prepped, because every Hellspawn heretofore has run out their batteries and gone back to hell, and none of them has been the one that's going to like truly lead the armies into the final battle,
Right.
which is why we have Al Simmons. Why he's special is that to Malbolgia, he could be the general of his armies that he's been waiting for, and to Heaven, he could be the one to break the cycle of the Hellspawn, I guess, or whatever. But here he's reaching a level of evolution in the Hellspawn life cycle that wasn't supposed to happen yet, and we don't know exactly when it would have been supposed to happen. Maybe when his power meter was supposed to have run out, then it would have happened if it had followed like its natural course. But because there was a disconnect between his body and his suit, it went back to where the suit was born initially. I'm just kind of spitting stuff out, but I think that's a little bit of what Todd McFarlane is doing here. It's just kind of yes-anding himself, going, yes, and I need an issue 51 of Spawn.
So I guess that brings the question it brings to mind for me is, has any other Hellspawn ever made it to this next evolution? It seems like no.
We don't know, and that's the thing, is that
because we know that Medieval Spawn was like afraid to use his power.
Right.
There's a bit in the narration in that issue that's like he doesn't want to use his power because he doesn't want to use the power meter.
And we've been told that there are some Spawn that burn out immediately, some Spawn that take hundreds of years, some that stick around
maybe
too
the
long.
only one that
maybe
has
so.
faced this trial?
Maybe so, and that's maybe why he knows so much about Spawns, is that he's been through this, and Spawn wasn't prepared, and so like he had. So at the end of the issue, spoiler alert, as we'll jump around a little bit here. At the end of the issue, the demon takes Spawn's heart, and says it's going to make him devoid of emotions because his love of Wanda that he's struggling with is the reason that he's been held back from actually becoming the evil hellspawn general that he's meant to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so between all that, before we get to that part exactly, we'll see
We're gonna check in with Terry.
Terry's being poked and prodded and fussed over by four old doctors, and he's kind of sick of it. He's like, yeah. I don't know what to tell you. They're speculating that maybe he's got superpowers he doesn't know about, and he is just kind of like tolerating it. The only sign that he's been through anything is that his temples have been grayed.
Right. I kind of do love the panel, him at the bottom of the panel with his chin in his hand.
Yeah, I like
Just
that one.
some really good cartooning.
Yeah.
I really like when we get as much as I. It's so funny because I went back to Spawn number 8 and I went back to some of the early issues. It is a real like shock to see Todd's like pure art
Mm-hmm.
next to Greg's because I've gotten so
Right.
used to Greg's.
Right.
So to go back, I'm like, oh my God, it actually does look so different. And I know that we just had Todd split issue 50, but I still
Right.
didn't feel that same sort of whiplash as like the early issues versus now.
Right.
Because I think even Todd has said like, oh, I tried to start drawing a little bit more the way that Greg draws the characters because he draws
Right.
them at this point more than I do. But I love when Greg just gets to do something a little bit more simple. His character acting is really good.
Yeah.
And and it's not exaggerated,
We're back to kind of Todd and Greg like sort of just intermingling, right? Or
Todd and Danny Miki are both inking at this point.
gotcha.
So it's hard to know that. I will say I think that is a Danny Miki page.
Yeah, it looks like it. The compendium, why I'm a little confused about the credits is in the compendium it says story pencils and inks Todd McFarlane, and then it says additional pencils 51 to 75 Greg Capullo.
Oh, that's very weird.
Additional inks Danny Miki 51 to 59. So
that's very weird. It's Greg on pencils. It's
right.
Yeah. It's Greg on all the pencils in this issue. It's Danny doing a bunch of pages that Todd can't get to. We'll get to it in the back matter, but basically Todd at this point is still caring for his ailing father-in-law.
Right.
We've touched on this a couple of times, but so he's sort of out of office, but he's still getting as much work done as he can. So
yeah.
That's
well, and we're also kind of getting to see a little bit of his opinion of the doctors that are sort of trying to treat his father-in-law here, kind of all fussing over him and not really having any actual answers.
I was going to say, I do think that a lot of the human stuff in these two issues, it's really mostly in this one, but it does feel ripped straight from Todd's life. We've said it before.
Yeah.
That a lot. I think this stuff with the doctors, Todd's probably accompanying his father-in-law to a lot of doctors. So he's just we're getting a little bit of how his father-in-law probably feels about them, how he feels about them, kind of filtered through.
And Terry's like, oh, I have a question. Do all specialists have to be old, bald, and nearsighted?
Yeah,
one of them's thinking, touche. And two of them are just totally vexed. And one of them says, I'll begin a study.
That's a good bit.
It's not bad.
And then we find out that, I guess, Todd's taking out his sexual frustration with his real life wife on the page.
Yeah, because it's Terry.
Real weird.
Catch up with Terry and Wanda hanging out together. And, she's saying, you seem perfectly healthy, but I'm still having a hard time dealing with all this. And he says, well, you've heard my opinion. And she says, not the whole sexual tension thing again. Is that all you think about? And he says, only when I'm awake or asleep. That's it. Which, all right, man. Cool. You're an alpha. I get it, Terry. You're always thinking about, like, how to get it in. And
Adidas.
he
probably wears Adidas.
That's right. Him and Jonathan Davis. And is this Is this saying that Terry believes that instead of brain cancer, he had blue balls? Does Terry think he had blue brains?
I don't know if you know this, but if you
Yeah,
have a lot of sexual tension built up, you get brain cancer.
it can really hurt you. Yeah, it can go back up into your brain if you don't
Yep.
shoot it out enough.
Right up the stem.
That's what they taught me in health class.
Yeah.
Wow. This is actually now a certified medical questions podcast. So if you have any medical questions, especially
Send them in.
about, send them
Especially about your sexual tension.
in.
Also, none of the opinions or medical or otherwise expressed on this podcast are a reflection of Newsarama or Games Radar.
That's right. My employers. This does not in any way reflect anything about them or any ability they have, or even I have, to deliver any kind of medical advice.
Follow our advice at your own risk.
That's right.
Except about Spawn, because we know more than you.
That's right. We probably know more than you about Spawn, unless your name is Todd McFarlane or Greg Capullo.
Even then.
Maybe so.
We'll see.
Maybe so, because we remembered what was going on the 4th level of hell.
Yeah.
But here we see also that Cyan, who we learn, is named after the purest form of blue. As the blue sky brings light to every day, so does she, which seems exactly like why Todd McFarlane was like, no, my daughter is named Cyan. It's because of this reason, and I'm going to put it in a comic now. Cyan comes barreling in like an atomic explosion, it says, and she's got an old binky, a soothie, it says here. Soother. Soother. Sounds
Weird.
like it sounds like a 2000s like grunge band. Soother.
That should be a.
That's got to be the Canadian term for it.
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't even think about it. My parents always just called it a pacifier.
Yeah, or a pacifier, exactly.
That's what
Which soother is exactly a synonym for that, but I guess that's fine. No one has ever said it that way until this comic. If you've ever said the word soother instead of pacifier, listeners, please write in. Let us know. That's Spawnography at spawnography.spawnography.
It's spawnographypod@gmail.com, but you're close.
That's right. Either one will probably work. But she's taken her soother and made a necklace of it by putting it around her neck on none other than the disgusting shoelace that was once holding together the two halves of Spawn's face after they were shredded by a batarang or a knife, depending on which version you believe.
No, a gun. It would be a gun in the Houdini one.
Oh, that's what.
Yeah, shot in the face. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, she found it at the hospital. We saw her take it. They make a big deal about it. I forget. I know the first issue of Mercy came out by now. Is it called Mercy?
I don't
Misery.
remember.
Excuse me. Misery is the story, the book about adult Cyan, and she's got superpowers now.
Great.
I forget if the shoelace plays into it, but I think it doesn't.
Okay.
We'll get there. We'll get there in a few years.
Yeah, at some point.
Actually, we're kind of barreling through Spawn. Less than a year. We've gotten through 50 issues. I guess we'll be there in like 5 years.
All right.
No, things will slow down.
We're covering
Curse of Spawn before the end of the year, so
there will still be podcasts in 5 years, I'm sure.
Well, we'll see. Global warming.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of which, we catch up with Sam and Twitch, and Sam and Twitch are hanging out talking about how they got stood up by the contact who had the files before, but this time they're going to meet him, and Twitch says they're going to do so because he knows things, secret things that they need to know.
And they have like a detailed rundown of every bank account controlled by Senator Jennings' campaign. This is another spot where I'm like, you're doing so much business, Todd. Like, if a new reader is reading this, if the thought was people are going to read issue 50 and then jump onto Spawn, God damn it, I would drop this book immediately. I'd be like, what the fuck are they talking about? Where's Spawn?
Because once again, they're jumping back to Spawnography episode 2 lore about Senator Jennings and how that connects to Billy Kincaid and all that stuff. And we haven't even actually tied in Senator Jennings yet, other than knowing that he's involved and Jason Wynn is involved and that they hung the chief Banks out to dry after he
Oof.
took his own life.
We
And
also know
speaking
that
of, go
Sam loves
ahead.
pizza.
Sam loves pizza. And speaking of hanging things out to dry, there's a whole gag in here where he farts so bad that Twitch starts to lose his mind and has to hang his head out a window to keep from vomiting.
I do kind of love the panel where he smells the fart. His eyes
Yeah.
go like a little cross-eyed and bugged out of his head. And like we
Yeah.
don't see Twitch's eyes a lot because of his glasses, but the fact that we get to see them like through the glasses,
Yeah.
it's stupid, but it's funny.
It's just another bit though of like, isn't Sam fucking disgusting?
Yeah, it's such a bummer, but
But well, outside, they hear noises and they run down to the alley to find Sam's new red 57 Chevy, 55 Chevy, I'm sorry, completely rebuilt for high performance. And he says, I call it the Crime Mobile. What do you think?
that again feels like it was in the first draft. He's like, we'll call it something. And then they just kept
Eh,
it the Crime Mobile. Although I guess
Sam certainly kept his first draft of it no matter what.
that's kind of my thing with Sam is that I think sometimes he's actually a pretty competent detective. So it's annoying when he's so crass.
Yeah, sometimes he turns into like Baby Huey.
And I never told. Did I ever tell you about the time I met a guy who introduced himself as Baby Huey?
Wow.
It was
No,
in
you didn't tell
Alabama.
me that.
He spoke about himself in the third person only. It was when I
That's
was on tour. We were like, Baby Huey, how did you get here? And he was like, you see those train tracks? Hopped on a train. Then we saw him 3 days later in Austin, Texas. We were like, how did you get here? He said, remember those train tracks? Hopped on a train.
wow.
The
That's
only thing I know about him is that he likes riding on trains, I guess illegally. I don't know that you're allowed to do that. And also, he loved whiskey because he repeated that to us a lot. Baby Huey loves whiskey. Anyway,
wow.
the crime mobile's here.
Some people are out there having whole adventures that we're just not a privy to.
Well, I feel like that was like his Spawn Across America.
Yeah. Well, I hope that his was more successful and left less dead bodies in his wake.
Yeah, me too. Jesus.
Yeah. Hope Baby Huey's not like the I-9 Strangler or something. Oh boy.
We're gonna cut back to Spawn and Flesh Monster Freud, and
But not before Sam apologizes for the beer and pizza farts.
yeah, that was our backup intro, I think, for the podcast, for the beer and podcast farts.
Wow.
So, so Spawn and the Flesh Monster Freud are continuing this panel of I don't really know what is happening here except that is Flesh Monster Freud's finger is Craig Capullo doing an art joke? And that's
Yeah, it kind of is. Like, it's definitely very phallic, its placement.
yeah, it's
In
real
relation
weird.
to Spawn's body. Yeah, the flesh monster is kind of nut tapping him.
Is he hitting him or is he just pointing on? And it's a very weird.
It's
panel.
hard to tell. It looks like he's touching him, and his skin is going crazy.
As much as I love, like how Greg draws the monster, I don't totally love this section because I think the lack of background almost feels like Greg was like, I don't really know where to put these characters. Like, I don't know what to do with them. So I don't know. This is the panel layout, I suppose. They're not laid out great. I just don't love them.
I kind of like the way Al's hanging there, like his body and his arm are kind of draped across the bottom panel on the one where you see Jason Wynn. Because now what's happening is the creature is pulling out Al Simmons' hate for Jason Wynn. We're seeing it manifested as Wynn holding a pawn that looks like Al Simmons in life. Here's where we learn that the K7 Letha was raised on the 4th level of hell and that it loves the flesh creature.
Oh, best panel of the whole book.
The nuzzling.
It's so cute.
Yeah.
They should
They love
bring
each
that guy
other.
back. I mean, I know they do because he's Spawn's costume, but like,
Yeah,
well, it's just a little guy. He does look like the in Spawn Kills the Universe or whatever that book is. The little
right.
tiny spawns that show up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I tried to read that book. It is not good.
Well,
But that's fine. We'll get there one day, or we won't.
so here's where we learn that the reason that Al Simmons hasn't become the true Hell's General yet and hasn't fully embraced his life as a Hellspawn and what he needs to do is because he's still holding on to his love for Wanda. And he's saying, remember the first time you went out, you didn't think it was going to be a match, but then you fell in love and you got married. And he's saying, you couldn't give her a son or a child or a baby, but Terry Fitzgerald could. He gave her a daughter. He gave her Cyan. And the creature says she gave her body to him. And Al, that drawing of his face all like melting there is kind of good. But he
Yeah, it's
says
cool.
it's not her fault. And it's like, what's not her fault? That she had a consensual relationship with someone? Like,
Well, no, like what's not like because I think he's recognizing that the flesh monster is trying to goad him a little bit, and he's got to say that so that like he doesn't feel worse. That's for him. That's not even for you know what I mean?
right.
Like it isn't her fault.
Yeah,
He's
okay,
just kind of
that's fair.
confirming that. You know what I mean? Like
That's
I think
fair. I was thinking it was tied more to him like blaming Terry and thinking he seduced Wanda or something, but
I think he's over that since the healing kind of. He still
right.
doesn't totally know what was going on with Terry, but he understands that like this isn't the he I think Al is understanding at this point that he doesn't have any bearing on these people's lives. He does sort of like his memory does, but he's not a person to them anymore. And so like he's not a person to Wanda. In a weird way, it is Al maturing, you know, which
Right.
again I think makes this an awkward kind of issue for new readers as opposed to I don't know the first 12 issues of Spawn
Right.
where we find out that he loves his wife. Um, but yeah, he rips his heart out. This heart rendered a little bit better than we've seen hearts rendered earlier, although it is
Yeah,
flesh colored instead of red, so
it
that's
looks a
weird.
little less like a ball of noodles.
I do love all the flesh monster expressions on these pages. Great job, Greg.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
like that one big shot of the maggot face Spawn, like right in the middle there, of all the different phases of Wanda around him, like really getting a head-on look at how Spawn's face now basically resembles the skull that was on his like
mhm.
emblem.
Actually, he kind of looks more like Chapel now at this point too.
Yeah, that's true.
And
But
then we get one final page.
that's right. We see that the Malbolgia somewhere in the
Vince Neil himself.
that's right is laughing about what's become of Spawn because he's now gone through the next phase of transformation he needs to go through to leave behind the humanity that he's been clinging to keep him from becoming Hell's true warrior, which is his heart and his emotions and his love for Wanda. And we'll see how some of that compassion has faded from Spawn, but not entirely, how it comes back in issue number 52.
Cool. Let's get into it. So, issue number 52 of Spawn, Image Comics presents Messiah. Story by Todd McFarlane. Pencils by Greg Capullo. Inks by Todd McFarlane and Danny Meeke. Copy editor and letters by Tom Orzechowski. Colors by Brian Haberlin, Dan Kemp, and Matt Mila. This one is in memory of, I know we're both big fans, Mark Gruenwald.
Yes. And this would have been right around the time that he would have passed too in the late 90s.
Yeah.
Love Grunwald's Captain America, of course. Also love his Thing, Mark Grunwald's Thing, which involved the UCW Unlimited Class Wrestling and She Thing and stuff like that.
Also, Squadron Supreme.
Yes, Squadron Supreme. I picked up a copy of that when we were in New York, in fact.
Yep. And also, he would have done Quasar with Greg,
Oh yeah, that's true.
if
That's
I'm
true.
remembering correctly. Does that timeline work out?
I think so.
Yeah, I think it does.
Mama
With
never said there'd be days like this.
one of my all time favorite covers is Pregnant Quasar.
That's
With
right.
Mama Never Said There'd Be Days Like This.
Good for her.
Yeah, true. I do. I actually should go back and read that Quasar run. I haven't read it in a minute.
I really liked Quasar at the time. I was always a sucker for like weird cosmic stuff, and I also recognized that he had the cosmic, like the bands, kind of like the nega bands that I knew from Captain Marvel. I always loved Marvel, the original Captain Marvel, but I didn't ever.
Before Captain Marvel went woke.
Yeah, I hated that. No, I like Carol Danvers quite a bit.
Yeah, she's great. Carol Danvers, all time. I would say top 20 Marvel character of all time.
One of the best. I like her.
Yeah.
But I always loved Captain Marvel. When I was a kid, he was already out of comics by the time I was reading them. But I had this like card matching game where you try to find two copies of the same superhero. And it had a bunch of characters that I only knew through that, like Falcon and Black Panther and these other characters. But it had Captain Marvel. And because I had never seen him in a comic and I was little, I thought that he was like Ronald McDonald, like just a mascot character from Marvel Comics.
Kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Which Captain Marvel look do you prefer? Do you like the red and blue with the yellow, or do you like the green?
I'm a sucker for that Gene Colan red and blue, but I also do like that original Kree green and white. I kind of like both. I didn't see that one until later, so by the time I saw that one, it was kind of like when I saw the original like yellow and red Daredevil, and I was like, Daredevil looked like that before.
See, I don't think yellow Daredevil's good.
I like it. I love it. I want some more of it.
But green Captain Marvel is good.
Yeah,
A+ to me.
Classic Daredevil is the plain red for sure, but I'm a sucker for when that costume and that color scheme is used.
I kind of like when Daredevil's in black. He's one of the few heroes that like he makes sense in black.
Yeah, I could see it, but the reason I like that it's not always black is because sometimes black stands out too much against non-black colors and shapes. So
that's true. He should get that. He should get that Vanta black.
Yeah. He should sue Anish Kapoor for the right to use Vanta black.
You know what? I have a great idea for Todd. Do one comic where all the blacks are Vanta black.
Have Anish Kapoor ink it.
There you go. And then it would be like a collector's item. You do one issue.
Right. But then it wouldn't be printed in Vanta black, and that's the problem.
Is there a way to print in Vanta black? I think.
No. So that's actually the reason. Okay, people joke about Anish Kapoor. Anish Kapoor is the person who has the rights to use Vanta black, the only person who has the rights to use the original Vanta black.
Does he?
Yes.
Okay.
Anish Kapoor is the artist who created the Bean in Chicago, I believe.
Oh, right. He bought the rights to it, and then somebody made the pinkest pink and banned him from buying it.
Everybody but Anish Kapoor can use it. The reason that Anish Kapoor is the only one who can use Vanta Black is not. I mean, I'm sure there's some level of like him wanting the exclusivity, but the reason is because you can't just use Vanta Black. You can't just like paint it on or like brush it on the way you can other inks, because it's made of like tiny carbon rods instead of like the usual structures of like ink. I'm not a chemist, so please don't come for me.
Chemists who are listening, though, let us know.
Yeah, but Vanta Black is apparently so delicate and specific in how it has to be applied, and even like the brushes require specific training, that he's the only one who's gone through the actual training and has the actual like ability to use it correctly. I'm sure some of that has to do with exclusivity, but there's like it's interesting that it's not just like paint you can use.
All right. Well,
this has been the Vanta Black podcast. Back to Spawnography.
We open, oh god, with like 3 pages of fucking.
Just basically text narration set to like, the art here is fine. In the first page, I kind of like the colors where it's more of an amber brown than like a straight black for like that
What is
bottom
this
chunk of the
house though? This
page.
doesn't look like like Terry and Wanda's house at
No, it
all.
does not. They live on Long Island, I believe, and
I
this
mean,
is
they live
like,
in Queens, and there are
that's
more
right, they live
houses
in
around, even
Queens.
in Bayside, which we've kind of established is where they must
But
live.
this is like a farmhouse out in the middle of nowhere. This is like
Yeah,
where my grandparents used to live in Vermont. Anyway, it's a beautiful rendering, very Thomas Kincaid, painter of light. Um, but we see that, inside we get a close up look at the shoelace that Cyan is tied around the soother. We get some insight into Cyan's thought process. She found it at the hospital and somehow knows that it's indelibly connected to her father's miraculous recovery. Whatever, toddler's kind of childish understanding she has of that. And we also see that just down the hall, there's another sign of Al Simmons that can't be let go, and that's Wanda's wedding band from when she and Al Simmons were married. She doesn't wear it anymore, but she keeps it close by even when she's asleep with Terry. For Terry, he can't sleep because he's having visions of Al visiting him in the hospital over and over that he's trying to understand. And as we'll see, even the dog is touched by Al Simmons' presence because Al was the one who raised it from a puppy to begin with.
which thank God the dog's looking a lot better than it did when Todd drew it.
That's right.
It did kind of look like a monster, but those 3 pages do catch us up on kind of 50 issues of Spawn in a way.
Yeah, in a way they do. And that way is through a lot of text.
Yeah, but they are brutal pages of comic books. This is exactly how not to make a comic book. This is like Batman Orphans level of comic booking. and Batman Orphans, dear listeners, is straight up one of the worst comic books I've ever read in my
That's
entire
Neil
life.
Adams, right?
I want to say it
I think it is. And that's the one that I picked up off the shelf and I looked at it and I literally just went, ugh, words, and put it back. It's rough. It's a lot of writing.
No. Batman Orphans is Eddie Berganza and Carlo Barberi.
Even
who
worse.
would. Here's the thing. I don't think the art is the problem.
No, but Eddie Berganza,
the execution, fuck that guy. But Carlo Barberi would be a future Spawn artist, current Spawn artist, actually. So it all comes full circle.
I can't remember which one I was thinking of, but there was a Neil Adams one that he wrote way too much in. Yes.
Probably
that
Odyssey.
Was not great.
At least
Neil Adams
art's
did a lot of great
good in
work,
that one though, because it's at least Neil Adams.
Right. Sure.
He like fights dinosaurs or some shit in that.
I don't even remember, bud.
Yeah, I think he does. Anyway, we get through these 3 pages of sort of recap. Terry wakes up from a nightmare. He's having dreams about Al. The dog sneaks up on him.
He has this realization that Al is Spawn and that he sees all the clues. And that's why he says what's worse, he's not ready to share his suspicions. It would bring Wanda too much pain because he's figuring it out.
And I have to imagine that, the world of, I know that there are like superhumans in this world, but like the young bloods and whatnot, but the world as presented has been pretty grounded. So for Terry to think this, he does understand that it seems a little bit crazy to say like, hey, I think your dead husband is back and he's that guy wearing the cape that's really scary and menaced you once, sort of. So yeah.
I get why he's not coming out and saying, I think a dead guy magicked my cancer away.
Yeah, exactly. But also he's been kind of miraculously cured, so I think he's on the fence. This is where I'm like, that bit of storytelling's good. That's good. That's like a character putting some sort of dots together, connecting some dots, and it makes sense.
Right.
We do get a really cool fucking Spawn after this.
Yeah, I do like this drawing. We see his costume has come back to him as he's been sent to the next level of hell. the 5th level now. He's entering Hell's 5th level like some dark avenging angel, shrouded in blood, becomes his 3rd test.
Now, we do kind of know about the 5th level. And unlike the 4th level, we've seen it.
Right.
And the panel in issue 8 is some planets. So it is not this. But I guess
this could be one of those planets.
That's my no prize explanation. This is a close up on one of the planets. Because that's that panel. It's just sort of like a couple of planets. Like it looks like Saturn and some other stuff. But anyway,
I have some thoughts about this whole issue from this point on.
So
first one is, go ahead.
Go for it. I was going to say it is a crossover sort of with Savage Dragon number 30. And
yes, we'll learn that in a few pages.
We are not going to cover that because it has nothing to do with anything.
No, basically what happens is, as Savage Dragon will explain, he's sent to hell by one of his enemies, and he fights his way back somehow.
Great.
But first off, my main thought here is, and I'm rarely going to say this, just flat out say something like this while we're doing Spawn especially, but the writing in this issue fucking sucks. The script is so dense and so difficult, and I am so tired by the time I get to like 3 pages in. And it's just talking about how in hell, there's a scripture that on this one level of hell, they're kept in check by their belief that a Messiah will come and free them and take them to heaven. And that it's become much like earth in that way. And it's just all this prophecy and nonsense, and how the prophecy
it also has
was
nothing
never
to do with
supposed
the
to come
last
true.
issue.
No, it's just a totally different level of hell.
So like the flesh monster Freud just let him go and gave him back his costume?
We sent him to the next level of hell. He did what he was supposed to do. Took his heart and sent him to the next place, which is what his trials are, I guess, is that he has to go through all these levels of hell. And in this place, he's kind of lost his compassion a little bit because there's all these people. I kind of like the weird green ghoul people that live
I like
here.
that.
I like the art in this issue quite a bit, was my other thought. I think that they draw the hell out of it, but God, they're like, okay.
One of the green people. Okay, so on the panel with on the page with Spawn at the top, and it's like the scriptures also like, and there's all the crying green people or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see the guy with his hands clasped together like he's praying?
Yes.
That looks just like Greg Capullo's Alfred.
It does look like exactly like Alfred. Wow. Sure does.
But I do. You're right. I actually really like the art here. There's some really cool perspective stuff. I love that giant green hand on that page. Also, like pointing at Spawn. There are just so many words. None of it matters.
It's all just basically they're establishing that they think Spawn is the Messiah that will bring them to heaven. And there's a prophet of the Messiah who has come forth that they want to fight Spawn to the death to see which one of them is the true agent of the divine will. And that is Savage Dragon. Savage Dragon, as often, hanging dong.
Yeah.
And he is ready to fight. It's almost played off like a Spawn versus Hulk fight in a way. I love the fight choreography. I really like the way they draw Savage Dragon, Capullo, Miki, and I assume Todd did some inking in here for sure.
Yep.
I really enjoy the rendering of Savage Dragon. I love the coloring on this issue. The different shades of green for Spawn's powers, Savage Dragon's skin, and the mass of that like sickly green, like the ghoul people of hell. I think it all works great, especially after an issue where most of the pages were just like white on white on white on white.
Yep.
But God, it's hard to read.
You would think that with that much green, you'd be like, what the fuck is going on? But it actually is extremely readable. Greg is also doing a little bit more of the Todd, like, I'm going to use some interesting stuff to break up panels and some interesting like panel borders and
energy of Spawn's like energy output. using some of the fight choreography to define the next panels. And finally, it winds up with Spawn defeating the Savage Dragon. Savage Dragon is declared a false prophet. Spawn is declared the true Messiah. Savage Dragon is trussed up and carted away while he's laughing.
It's all like a little bit strange because, again, if you're a new reader, Savage Dragon appearing does put into context those first 3 pages, right?
Right.
Theoretically, Savage Dragon readers are checking in on Spawn now. Savage Dragon only at about issue 30. Spawn at issue 52, obviously. Maybe they're checking in on Spawn. Although I don't know any... Like, Spawn's the way more popular book, so I don't know that it's really working that way, right?
Right.
It's more likely that Spawn readers are checking in on Savage Dragon, maybe after a layoff, maybe because they bought maybe the first few issues and decided it wasn't for them, whatever it was. But like, all right, I can forgive the first 3 pages for that reason. But this whole thing's just kind of bizarre. They tie up Savage Dragon, then they put him under this rock because he's going to be executed, and they piss on him.
Yeah, he's being befouled with grime, fed his last meal, showered in urine.
Also, does Savage Dragon always just have 2 toes?
I don't know.
I don't really know anything. Check out our other podcast,
Savage
Dragography. I would really love a drag queen to do a Savage Dragon.
You know, I didn't think of it, but when I call it the Crime Mobile, calling way back to that with Sam and Twitch. The first time I read that, I'm just remembering, I thought, I call it the Spawn Unity.
Yeah, it's basically the same.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, we are the Sam and Twitch of the Spawn Unity.
That's right.
I would say.
That's right.
And it varies episode to episode who's who.
That's right. Whichever one of us is farting more, whichever one of us is firing more guns.
Exactly.
Yep. But Spawn visits Savage Dragon in his weird little prison and is like, why are you laughing about this? And Savage Dragon is like, look, man, this is all bullshit to me. I don't know what's happening and I don't care.
Us too, Savage Dragon.
Some weird villain probably injected me with hallucinogens and I'm probably tripping my balls off right now. So I'm just going to enjoy it. And none of this matters to me.
Yeah, and then Spawn does his... Savage Dragon feels exactly how we do about this issue, which is, hey, Savage Dragon, didn't need to see you. You're kind of getting in the way.
This is all bullshit. None of this matters to me. So, so we're just going to have fun with it. Spawn declares that they should have some mercy for Savage Dragon. And they're like, mercy? Are you fucking joking? You can't possibly be our Messiah if you believe in mercy. Our Messiah believes in an eye for an eye. They swarm over Spawn and carve his kind of symbol onto a rock. It says they believe that the false god bears a symbol of his vileness. Spawn didn't have one. That didn't matter. They don't
carve that into a rock. They carve it into him.
That's what they do. You're right.
It's just the coloring is really weird because he's like bone white at this point.
Yeah, I'm just losing my mind.
And then he's getting Mark Silvestri on the cover of X-Men 251.
Yep. So is Savage Dragon.
They're both getting X-crucified. I like that the smoke, or is it smoke?
Why did I think they carved that on a rock? Am I that bad at reading comics?
I know this is your first one, but
I know.
I didn't want to say anything.
Yeah.
They are crucified on X's.
Yes.
And I do like that the necroplasm is like censoring Savage Dragon's
dong again.
Massive dong.
And you can kind of see it outlined in the smoke anyway. Also, though,
you can.
Savage Dragon's arms are twice as big as his waist.
I mean, that was true of the first, even the kind of the first appearance of him, which I love. I actually really love that first rendering of Savage Dragon with his bloodied arm and fist, and Do you think Eric Larson was like a little mad when he saw this issue? Because he's like, man, does this guy draw Savage Dragon better than me?
I mean, King Capullo. That's all I'll say.
He's truly also, the more that we're seeing him ink with Danny Miki, I know that we're getting closer and closer to for what you and I are a little bit more familiar with from him. But
Right.
like, boy, oh boy, dude is also like leveling up massively.
Yeah. And we're seeing it, and it's
That
fun.
even two inkers is not like, we're not like, this page sucks, this page is great. It's just like, cool, everything's cool, everything
Yeah.
looks good. And I think he's getting so comfortable. I would
Yeah.
say that last issue is one that he read a little bit uncomfortable, like I said, with some of those like panel layouts and stuff. But
Right.
here, he's like, oh, I know what this is. This is a fight comic. And then Todd was like, but I have a million words.
But he also handles drawing huge crowds of these like demon people really well.
Yep.
And again, I made the joke about the oldest game, but that's kind of what's going on in this level of hell, is that their torment is defined by the fact that they believe that someday they too will find salvation. And so Spawn and Savage Dragon are trussed up on these crosses. The shaman of the weird demons, who is the one who talks about their scripture, says, "Let he who is with sin cast the first stone." They all raise their fists to hurl their stones to destroy Savage Dragon and Spawn, but instead it says their weapons will not strike their intended targets. The crucified pair vanish in a blink. And so now we see that on the final page, Malbolgia is looking down over the house that I guess is the Terry Fitzgerald and Wanda's house.
Yeah.
And we learn that the balance of power, the hierarchy of power in that corner of the Image Comics universe, that one corner of hell, will be shifted forever by Spawn's actions, because now they believe that now they have doubt in their own Messiah, so their torment is even deeper.
Great.
Yep.
And I mean, I kind of like some of this last page. I'm just gonna read a little bit of it. Anarchy will be the rule, set in motion for the next million years by a puppet used in an unholy war. The arrival of this spawn, now branded, has set forever in motion these cataclysmic events. His lord, the evil Malbolgia, has finally found a way to even a personal score with the ruler of level 5. For though hell does seek to conquer the powers of good, its lords also seek to eviscerate each other. Imagine what these hellish beings would leave in their wake on this earth. Next, Spawn versus Malbolgia.
And there you go. Teeing up Spawn 53, which will
Don't
be
you feel
next
like
episode.
Spawn versus Malbolgia would have been great for, I don't know, issue
Number
50?
Yeah, maybe. Or it could, honestly, Pierce, it could be something that barely happens and doesn't really matter.
We're going to find out.
We will. In our next episode and the next issue of Spawn. For now, hit us with that back matter if you've got any.
Yeah, so the back matter Spawn 51, that's the only issue that I have in physical form. That is not the compendium. Todd talks about how, so we are now barreling towards the movie. So it's going to be, this is August 96. And,
okay. Oh, wow. That would have been
we're getting there.
My 13th birthday.
You're the perfect age to be a Spawn reader.
Exactly.
So by the time 51 comes out, San Diego Comic-Con had just been over the 4th of July holiday. That sounds like a nightmare time to have San Diego Comic-Con. Jesus. He hung out with Michael Jai White. They introduced him at a big panel, probably in Hall H. The Spawn Bible's coming out next month. We're not covering that because it's just a guide to the Marvel Universe type thing. But if anybody wants us to cover it, I guess let us know, but we're not going to. And he announces that Curse of the Spawn is going to be coming out. Dwayne Turner on pencils, Danny Miki on inks, Tom Orzechowski on letters, and Alan McElroy writing. He's the writer of the show. He adapted the comic for the show. And he mentions that he's currently out of his regular home office as he's with his ailing father-in-law. So he also shouts out one of the locals of Duncan, British Columbia, Jaron Dobson. He's been babysitting, organizing, and taking care of Todd through this issue.
Oh,
so the letters are they're like a little funny. There's one that's like, oh, I read comics, then I saw the first appearance of Venom drawn by you. I was hooked. I only started to read comics that contained your artwork. Here's one thing that I think has been very interesting and hard for us to understand, because I don't know that we've had any artist who's been as big a superstar in such a long time.
mm-hmm.
It is extremely interesting, and it puts into context all the people that are like, I wish you would draw more Spawn.
Right.
People were really just obsessed. Like this, like Todd's art was a real lightning bolt for a lot of people.
Yeah.
As obviously evidenced by Spider-Man selling so much and by Spawn selling so much. Is there a modern artist that you can think of, like within the last 10 years, that is like
On that level, I mean, there are the guys like Alex Ross who everything they do is going to sell, but they're not doing, I don't know. It's not the same anymore because the speculation market is different. There's not the fervor around like this art means something because some important person drew it and therefore it's worth something. I think our relationship with comic art is very different, and our relationship with like how we get into specific art and how that art becomes popular.
I think that we're back though in a writer-centric market. Though,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
Like we are not we like people will show up for like the new Jonathan Hickman, but they don't care to show up for, even though he's doing great work with Jonathan Hickman, the new Marco Cicchetto.
It's not the same level of fandom.
If there's anybody that I think could be on that level, and maybe it's just because he is for me, is Daniel Warren Johnson.
Oh yeah. Well, I think there are artists that should be on that level and that in the industry with itself have what could be maybe like a proportionately comparable level of like interest and stuff. I think there are great artists. I think also a lot of artists that get a lot of work are decent artists who are underpaid and get a lot of work because they're willing to work for less. Because let me rephrase that. Because Marvel and DC and big publishers are able to convince them to work for less because they need
for
the money.
The pleasure
because
of working on iconic characters,
right, for sure,
will pay you less than what you're worth.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a moment in time that like I sort of wish I could go back in time just to experience, because it's very, we're 50 issues in and we're still getting letters that are like, I'm obsessed with your art. And then like this letter continues. I was handed a copy of Spawn number 38. Yes, yes, yes. I bought every copy of Spawn they had in stock, which was only the most recent. My next purchase was number 1, but I'm catching up slowly. Like now, in a really like eBay being as much of a thing, this guy is going out and like trying to buy every single issue of Spawn that he can.
Right.
And Todd doesn't even draw them at this point, even by the time that he's looking at them, you know? He asks also if Spawn was influenced by Venom, and Todd explains that like really Venom wasn't influenced by Spawn, but
right.
that he
which we've talked about a few times.
Yeah, but that he didn't want to make Venom an anti-hero, that he always intended Venom to be closer to what Clown is.
Disgusting.
Yeah, basically. Then they also ask, what is your favorite Spawn comic? And ever the salesman, Todd says, well, when it comes out, Spawn number 52 is going to be my favorite Spawn comic. Which, good work. Good.
Nice.
Appreciate a huckster.
Yeah.
That's a very Stan Lee move.
Yeah.
Oh, they're all my favorite issues. My favorite issue is the next one that comes out.
Yeah. The
Honestly,
next one that comes out is going to be Excelsior.
Stan would say that his favorite Marvel comic is the next one you buy.
Yeah.
Probably.
Absolutely.
The other ones are asking about how he decides on letters to publish. And Todd goes, I don't read all the letters. I have other people read all the letters. They hand me a pile of them. Then I read some of them. Then sometimes they just ask me questions and summarize the letter. And then I dictate my answers and somebody else types them. Sorry to like burst your bubble on that. That's how it works.
Todd doesn't read, not even letters.
Yeah, apparently. And then this guy says, first off, let me start by saying I'm a 27-year-old commercial truck driver. I drive an 18-wheeler and I work hard for every penny I make.
Okay.
But nothing satisfies me more than taking a little bit of that, buying something for myself. My main priority is to buy Spawn the day it reaches my local comic shop.
Hell yeah.
He says, speaking of which, I just finished issue 48. It was, as usual, wonderful. I absolutely loved it. As an aspiring artist, I can appreciate the amount of work and talent it takes to produce such a great book. I'm sure you know the amount of talent you have on your team. Singing a lot of praise for Greg Capullo and Tony Daniel here, which is great because he mentions that like they got a lot of criticism in their first few issues because people want to just see Todd art. He asks about there. Apparently, there's a Forbes article. I couldn't find it before we recorded, so I didn't pull it up. But he then is concerned about McFarlane Toys because Toys R Us has been accused of price fixing, and he wants to know what Todd thinks of that. And Todd is like, the Forbes article is as accurate as a print article can be, which is a weird way to say that.
Yeah.
But I guess what he means is like it can get printed and things can change after the fact. So
right.
like, you know, and then he goes, Toys R Us has always been good to us. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
he's not going to bite the hand that's feeding right now because he's making it's coming in hand over fist.
No way. Yeah. The pinups in this one are whatever. One is by one. I don't even know who it's by because I can't read the signature. Sergio. I don't know. And one's by Kevin Conrad. It's kind of cool. Okay. And then there's some toys in the back. The toys in the back are sick as hell, though. This zombie Spawn figure is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my entire life, and I need it.
I gotta look that one up.
It's so cool.
Oh, yeah, that one. I remember that one.
There's also Wolf Spawn, a guy named Weed Whacker. The first Salmon twitches, but Twitch. Well, Sam comes with like a little pistol and a donut, and he also has like donut frosting on his face. Twitch comes with like an Uzi instead of like a revolver. I also love this guy, Nobody, and I also love the Fleabiac skeleton.
The Fleabiac skeleton. That sounds cool.
Yeah. And then in the back, there's some ads for the Spawn Chromium cards.
Okay.
So that's cool. And that's going to have new art by Todd, Greg, Kevin Conrad, Tony Daniel, Jim Lee, J. Scott Campbell, Umberto Ramos, Adam Hughes, Aaron Wiesenfield, Richard Bennett, and many more. As well as an ad for Curse of the Spawn. Not a one-shot, not a mini-series. A new ongoing. And just saying that it's going to like tell other stories, tell kind of out of continuity, not out of continuity stories, but like out of timeline stories. So kind of cool. We'll get into Curse of the Spawn at some point, but that's all the back matter I have. What are your thoughts on these two issues? They're not an arc. They're just kind of two one-shots, but I was sick of doing one issue episodes.
Well, and they go together. They're two steps on his journey through hell. You know, my final thoughts are that the art is great, the script is lagging again. We're getting to the point where it's getting bogged down and telling us the same stuff that we've been reading for 50 issues. We were kind of reaching a point where like there was a sweet spot with the recaps where they weren't too tedious, and now it feels like we're getting back to them being kind of a drag.
Yeah.
But the art's holding it together, and I actually kind of thought the Spawn Savage Dragon fight was pretty fun. We didn't really get into a blow by blow on it, didn't really need to, but I think it's worth looking at the issue, if nothing else, to have the fun of that. Yeah, what about you? Final thoughts, Pierce?
I think given that Todd has been very upfront in the back matter about being a little bit distracted
Right.
as he's dealing with sort of family stuff, real life stuff, which totally valid.
Mm-hmm.
Spawn comes second to real life people. Those like 3 pages of recap feel like I don't have time to break this out into panels. The fact that he doesn't just give his artists license, and the fact also that Tom Orzechowski, who is effectively the editor, as we've been told, doesn't go, well, this sucks. We should fix
Yeah,
this.
I don't want to letter all this.
Kind of makes me think like, did this come in like a week before or 2 weeks before
Right.
this had to go to print? So like we don't have a lot of time. It does also feel like Orzechowski as an editor stays out of Todd's way and just
Right.
goes, "You're the boss. You pay my bills, so I'm going to
Yeah.
leave it alone."
I letter at the pleasure of the writer.
I'll say this: I love Orzechowski as a letterer. I think he is one of our all-time talents. I think I think Tom could use like a class or two in editing because we've seen spelling mistakes. Like there's been weird stuff. They've called it out a couple of times, and then there's been errors in the call out.
There's a part of me that like wonders if like he knows every single one of those and they haunt him. You know what I mean? Like if he's just like, no, that's because Todd was out. This it was too late. But then there's also a part of me that's just like, ultimately these are comics that are meant to be read, and
Not meant
you
to be
don't need to.
podcasted about.
Yeah, exactly. Not meant to be like dug into on that level. I don't know. I think it's also just probably a combination of multiple things, like script coming in late, not having the training as an actual editor, not having the time to fuss over every single thing like that. But yeah, I think ultimately though, when you look at it, the reason those things are more noticeable is because they're in the letters and everybody can
Yeah.
interpret those correctly. Sometimes there's errors and missteps in the art. One of those, there was a panel that we just talked about that I thought was something being etched in a rock, and it was totally not that. And it's just because like the coloring and the layout and everything just didn't come together.
Yeah.
So every part of a comic can have a mistake in it, and I don't think those necessarily drag everything down. But I think because the lettering is the art of a comic that we actually read, the part of it that makes it a comic, it's easier to notice those things. We have more training in our lives to notice grammar and stuff like that and spelling.
Yeah, 100%. I think you're totally right. Like I said, I don't think it's any fault of Orzechowski because especially if a script comes in late, it's like, do I have time to go back and forth with this guy? Does he have time to make edits to this?
Right.
He has said that Orzechowski has massaged some stuff, but I'm imagining that is only like, hey, you took 4 words to say this thing that I know you could say in 2 words, so I'm going to change
Right.
it so it fits in the bubble. Not
Right.
like, oh, you didn't write panel descriptions. You just wrote like splash page this, splash page this, splash page this.
Right.
So, it's a bit of respect for Todd, I think, at that point, but uh, it makes her a little bit of a rough reading experience. But, that is the journey that we're taking with Spawn. Is like I said, I think at the top that it feels a little bit like taking 1 step forward, 2 steps back.
Right.
And it's probably more like just sort of pedaling in place. right? We're treading
Right.
water. We have not learned all that much new of anything new. Our characters are mostly in the same spot they've been since the end of issue 50. Mostly, relatively. I know that
Yeah.
Spawn is moving through hell, but Al is he's an interestingly passive character.
Yeah. You know, it's almost like Hellboy sometimes, where there are a lot of Hellboy stories where it feels like he's kind of just along for the ride in his own tale. You know, he's kind of just incidentally there while a plot unfolds. And that's how it feels for Spawn a lot of the time too, is that there's just shit happening around him and he's reacting a lot more than he's acting. And then a lot of the time when he acts, he fucks up. So, you know, maybe this new evolution, not having a heart, maybe that will lead to the next stage of Spawn where he's a little more effective and wants to take a few more steps forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I would, you know, he doesn't get a lot of interiority in these two issues. We don't get too much of a sense of how Al feels about things that are going on. And I hope that as we move forward with this evolution, as we move forward with Spawn versus Malbolgia, that changes. But
Yeah.
we'll see. There's a lot of. I will say one thing: Todd does not write himself into corners. If
No, he'll find a
anything,
way out.
if anything, things are left pretty open, and there are a lot of different paths for him to
Yeah.
take. So,
Yeah.
we'll see what happens.
Well, I think that about sums it up for Spawn 51 and 52.
Absolutely, George. Where can people find you if you want them to find you?
Well, you can read my writing every rockin' and rollin' day at newsarama.com, whose opinions are not reflected in this or any episode of Spawnography. You know, you can check out some of my music. It's Witch Crisis on YouTube. I've got some other stuff, I guess, here and there, but yeah,
I've been working
that's
on some stuff.
yeah,
I know you sent me a track.
that's right. I did
I'll have
send you
some
that
stuff for you
track.
soon.
We'll talk about that. All right, flashy,
For
flashy.
the listener, this is an audio medium, so I'm waggling my eyebrows a lot.
That's right, indicating that they're hiding a deeper secret. This is great radio. This is great radio. And on on that note, Pierce, where can they find you?
You can find me at PE Lightning or at labs.punk on various social media. But more importantly, you can find the show at Spawnography or at Spawnography Pod. I'm usually pretty good about posting things there when we have new episodes.
Yeah.
Uh, you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, all the places, whatever pod catcher that you use. A thing that really, 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 really helps is if you leave a review, preferably a good one. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. That's what your mom told you, right? But that's really helpful. If you write a review, even better. We'll read it on the air. If you have anything to say to us directly, anything you want to mention, did we get something wrong? Email us, spawnographypod@gmail.com. I promise you we'll respond to you there. And if the email is okay to print, then we'll share it on air as well. But
Yeah.
listen, George, for Todd so loved the world.
He gave his only begotten spawn.
See you later, Hellspawn.